And welcome the female founders to kick off a season 8, Sam. Holy smokes. Yeah. Over the years, there's been 68 panelists that actually Sam can recite these alphabetically, so please ask her later to do so. And 27 events. I'm Dave Bradbury. I work with Sam, Emma, and Nicole up at the Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies, where we get up every day and try to help startups, founders, and those that want to make do and improve our communities do so through businesses, entrepreneurship, and education around those topics. Thank you for coming out. Change happens by those who show up, who engage, who learn. My God, the original gangster entrepreneur, Hinda Milla's in the house with jog bras. So, woo! Thank you. Also want to thank Hotel Vermont for hosting and Hans and his team. So really special to be here. It's by design that we keep a space this size so that there's interaction, talking, and trust and follow-up that does happen. So that's one of the reasons. And to Media Factory, who tapes this, edits it, thank God, my comments get removed. And over the years, it's been distributed in 7 different states, Quebec, and it goes into households that maybe Sam and I don't walk into all the time. So it really does have an opportunity to demystify, to educate and inspire people to take a risk, to reach out, maybe start something. And that's really, really neat and special. And I guess the last point I have is, Sam, you ready? Because I'm done.
Yeah, get out of here. Hi, everyone. Boy, is it good to be back. My goodness. And with a full room. I actually missed our March event last year because I had COVID. So Dave stood in for me and moderated. So anyone that went to that event, your refund will be done after. So just meet me outside and we'll take care of that. As I understood, it was a disappointment. So I'm kidding, Dave. You did great. I'm so proud of you. So I'm really happy to be here tonight, and hopefully all of you are as well. I can actually tell how stacked our panel is based on how mean the emails in my inbox are from people that didn't get a ticket to the event. And I got like cyberbullied today in my email from people that didn't get tickets. Luckily, we have the Media Factory here. They are filming it for us, so it will be accessible to everyone after the event. So not to worry, but I mean, you all speak for yourselves, obviously. So tonight we're going to be talking about company culture. And because I feel like this topic is a little like popular, buzzwordy, I did a little bit of research and figured out, like, what are we actually talking about, right? Like, what is company culture? And there's so many different definitions out there. And I found one I really liked, and I just wanted to, I never do this, but I just want to read a definition so that we're kind of all on the same page to start. And this was from Belle Wong in the Forbes. And Belle said, company culture is the secret sauce of your organization, one that goes far beyond holiday parties or casual Fridays. Company culture represents the living, breathing persona of your company, capturing the norms, values, and behaviors that define the very character of your business. So I just really liked that. I thought that was a good place to kind of start because, again, I think we hear this term a lot, but we're like, what are we actually talking about? So I thought that was kind of a good place to start. So I think tonight what we're talking about is how do we develop that character in a way that creates happier, more dedicated, effective, and fulfilled employees? So I can't imagine 4 better people to talk about this tonight. So I'm going to start by having all of you introduce yourselves, but just to get so that everyone kind of knows where we're going here, we have Katie and Willa Clark from Beta, we have Julie Lineberger from WheelPad, and we have Premila Peters from Data Innovations. So we'll start down with Premila. You can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your company does.
Sure. Can you hear me? Great. So let me start with myself. As Sam said, I'm Premila Peters, and I am the president and CEO of Data Innovations. And I'm really passionate about growing organizations and growing people, which is why I'm here tonight. And from a background perspective, I was just sharing with Julie, I've lived in 3 places in my life. I've lived in Bombay, I've lived in Burlington, and I lived in Beijing. And the only thing they have in common is the letter B. But I have lived in Vermont for 31 years. I came to UVM to do my MBA, fell in love with the state, and haven't left. So here I am. And Data Innovations is that better?
Yeah.
We were going to wait and see how long you guys would last with that. And
just me.
not a single person left, so.
So DI is a company that was founded back in 1989, and the real purpose of our company is to empower labs to optimize patient care. I know that sounds like a lot of words. So what we actually do is we automate a lot of testing that goes on, lab testing. How many of you had a blood test, urine test, biopsy, whatever, COVID test? So we are the software that runs lab instruments in 50% of hospitals in this country.
Dang. Is anyone else like, oh, that's what they do? Like see data vintages all the time.
I'm Julie Lineberger. I live down in Wilmington, Vermont. Some people call it almost Vermont, between Bennington and Brattleboro. And I've been here, almost about the same time you have. I'm originally from California, Los Angeles, and came here by way of doing work in Papua New Guinea, Colombia, on the Thai-Cambodian border. I was always into just working with various UN organizations and education, and then, like my friend here, fell in love with an architect, and what'd we do? Moved to One Stoplight Town to open an architectural practice. But then a few years ago, our godson became quadriplegic 6 days before his 27th birthday. And when he got out of rehab, he was getting a new job in Portland, Oregon, and in that liberal city could not find an accessible apartment to rent where a caregiver could help him in the shower. So he was forced to live in a accessible motel room for 9 months before he finally figured out his program, bought a house, called his godparents to say, hey, will you make this universally accessible for us? And while we were doing that, my husband has 500 ideas a week. But this time he said, Riley, what if there had been an accessible bedroom and bathroom that you could have attached to your mom's house or your brother's house, and you wouldn't have been isolated for so long? So WheelPad was born. And my husband, like I said, has lots of ideas, but I make them happen. And I said, this one I'm going to make happen. So we started a second business. I do very little now for Line Sync Architecture full-time. We have grown. We just got a new order for 8 suite pads. It's a suite pad, which is thank you. It's an accessible bedroom and bathroom. We have a studio pad. that's like a studio apartment that has a little kitchenette. And we were doing really well, and then when the pandemic came, all of our manufacturers decided that, oh, well, we've lost half our workforce, we can't build for you anymore. And we're like, well, that's not rocket science. We know the building industry. We'll start our own factory. So I am now running a manufacturing factory, which I knew nothing about. I mean, get me back to Papua New Guinea, you know? And, but we're loving it, and we're a mission-driven company, and I will tell you more about it.
Thanks, Julie.
Maybe you should go first, because then I'll explain why I'm here.
Oh. Hi, everybody. My name is Katie Clark, and I work at Beta Technologies. We build electric airplanes and charge networks to charge the airplanes. And you can't hear me. Hi, I'm Katie. I work at Beta. We build electric airplanes. I was told that I should start with a disclaimer. So about a week ago, I fell about 12 feet and landed on my head, and I woke up in a pool of blood talking to my Apple Watch, which, who here has an Apple Watch?
Now I do.
I feel like we have to, so if you don't have an Apple Watch, I wish this were like Oprah, and I could be like, Apple Watch is for everybody. But my Apple Watch actually called an ambulance for me. Like, it noticed that I had a hard fall, and I woke up, like, I don't know, 15 minutes later, and there was a voice coming out of the darkness. It was very bizarre. But it noticed that I fell, and then I guess it taps you, and if you don't respond, if you're unconscious, it will call an ambulance and initiate a whole thing for you. So I bought my kids all Apple Watches this week. Yeah, and this is my daughter, Willa. She's back up because I'm not 100%, but I'm gonna try to give you 100% tonight. But I'm from Vermont. My husband and I were raised here. We met in middle school. He was a huge geek, and I was not. And so he would ask to date me, and I would say no. And he would go home and build model airplanes in his garage, and I would make fun of him. And I ended up liking that about him as time went on. And we got married, and we had Willa. She's our oldest, and she also works at Beta. Willa is. Am I supposed to say anything else?
You're good.
I'm good. Let's have Willa
introduce
go.
herself. Yeah,
Great.
love that.
Hi, I'm Willa. I also work at Beta and Katie's daughter. I work on our public affairs team and primarily focused on workforce development and community outreach and engagement. And then I'll elaborate on Beta a little bit. We are an electric aerospace company, and we design and build electric aircrafts. But not only are we designing and building electric aircrafts, we're also focused on designing and building and deploying a charging network to support our aircrafts, and then a training platform to teach people how to fly our aircrafts, and then a maintenance platform to teach people how to work on them as well.
Amazing.
Good
Thank
job,
you for
honey.
being here, Willa. Yeah, so imagine my surprise when I'm reading this email from Katie on Saturday morning, and I'm like, I read it like 3 times. I'm like, wait, not in this email did she say I'm not coming. She just explained the situation. I was like,
No,
oh.
she just said I was.
Yeah,
coming.
I'm like, great. We would love to have Willa, and you're not just a backup. We're really happy that you're here. So one of the reasons I chose y'all for this panel is your companies are very, very different. So just quickly, can we go, just tell me how many employees you have and where your employees are. We'll start with you, Premila.
All right. We have roughly 270 employees, and they're in 10 different countries.
Wow.
50 in Vermont.
Thank you.
I haven't counted them. I told David we had 9. I think we have about 9. We have our manufacturing team that are all based in Vermont. They're all in Windham County. And we've got my chief of staff is also in Windham County. We've got salespeople that are in Connecticut and Berlin here. We've got a project manager that's in upstate New York. And we have a bookkeeper who just has to quit for another reason. She loves us. She's giving to us till December 14th. Anyone wants a part-time bookkeeper job? See me. And we're just and then there's my husband and I think I'm forgetting somebody else. But that's where we are now, but we are growing really rapidly right now.
We're about 600 people, about 300 here in Vermont, about 100 in Canada, in our Montreal office. There's about 40 people. Don't do the math because I'm probably going to screw this up. Where it's about 40 people in North Carolina, maybe a handful in D.C., like one guy in Ohio.
I'm so glad he gets a shout out.
Yeah.
Good for him, you know?
And a couple folks in over in Plattsburgh, New York, at our flight test center. I think we're 400 here now.
We're 650 and 400 are here.
Right.
Nailed it. I think that was pretty close on the math.
Yeah.
I would never do that in my head, but we're going to give you a pass on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The first question I have is just, and I think, Julie, you having a smaller company, I think it'll be kind of a clear answer, but maybe for the larger companies, it'll be a little bit different. But I'm just curious, is company culture the job of HR? Yes or no, and why?
Absolutely not. Company culture is the job of every single person in the company. It starts with leadership. And you need to get buy-in and work on it with every single member of the company from the get-go. Everyone needs to know what each other's doing. In our sense, we have meetings about company culture because psychological health is just as important as safety. We have a strict rule that people talk to each other or with each other, not about each other. And that goes and because I'm running a manufacturing business, and a lot of the things you hear about manufacturing with maybe pinup girls and that type of conversation does not hold water because it's not respectful conversation. And we have such buy-in right now, especially from our senior members of our manufacturing team. They can't believe that they found a place like this. And it's every single person. Now, our HR chief of staff person does help me, bringing articles, saying, okay, this is going to be the quote of the week, this is that. But it's something that every single person in the company has to be part of.
That was a great answer.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
She nailed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree, for sure. It's the responsibility certainly of leadership to drive that. It starts at the top. And it's easier said than done as you grow, right? So
Even with 9 people.
Yes.
Or however many I have.
Because, yeah. So I think there's a desire to want to push it on HR, but it's, HR enables and supports, to your point. And it's hard in a technology company particularly. I feel like hey, that's all the soft stuff. Have HR do it. And I think that's absolutely not how it works well.
Yeah. Katie, what do you think?
I agree with what these ladies have said. It's everybody's responsibility. Certainly, I feel like our HR team, I feel like we're keeping HR on their toes. They're like, oh, what did the clerks do again? So it's they're keeping us. They're like legal and benefits.
Yeah.
And for us, our company culture is, I don't know, it's fresh and it's exciting and it's a little bit cutting edge and it's about being kind and loving and transparent and accepting others, but it's also about pushing the boundaries a little bit and doing what's right, even if it's, I don't know, maybe a little weird, maybe makes people a little uncomfortable.
That has to be a T-shirt for Beta now. Like, that's definitely going on the back of a T-shirt. Has to be a little weird.
It's going to be a little weird.
You don't even have to give me credit for that.
You can have credit.
You'll just get a T-shirt.
Yeah. Okay, that works. Willa, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's a responsibility of everyone in the company to maintain a culture, and if HR can promote a culture or leadership can promote a culture, but if the team members or the employees at the company don't represent it, then you don't have a culture.
Yeah, totally. So if it's sort of like, something that leadership is responsible for, right, and really everyone on the team, let's talk for a second about interviewing, like finding new people to join your team. Any advice or ideas about how you can figure out whether someone's a culture fit in an interview? I find that to be, I'm very type A, so I'm looking at like, are they competent? Can they do this thing that I need them to do? And then as an afterthought, I'm like, shit, can I sit in a room with this person for 8 hours? Right? And so just looking for any advice that you all have of what do you do in your companies to make sure that they're a good culture fit?
So from an advice perspective, I think the best advice I've received is to think about in your team, if you're hiring for someone in a particular function, sales or engineering, think about who are the people on the team who are the best people, the people you love, like your top people, like you would cry if they told you they were leaving. And then think about what it is that makes them, there. And typically, it's a lot of things that's not related to those technical competencies that you're talking about, those functional competencies. So I would say that's something we coach our managers to make sure they're looking at that profile. Mm-hmm. So that's a tip I would give with that. As far as DI specifically, when I'm interviewing, for example, for leadership roles, because that matters a lot in terms of what happens afterwards, things like drive matter. And I ask very simple questions like, what drives you? And those responses tell me a lot.
Like if they say a paycheck, then you're like, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. Hot tip if anyone's interviewing at Data Innovations.
There you go.
Want to go next?
Well, we use a whole team. I feel like our hiring process has become a process, which is a word that makes me uncomfortable. But I interview a lot of people that are engineers or they're technical writers or they're all the things that I'm not. And it's not my job to determine whether or not they're qualified to do the specific job that they're interviewing for. It's my job to determine whether or not I think they're an asshole. And I love it when I swear and people clap for me.
She does that all the time.
You're in the right place.
Our HR team calls us wayfinders now. So there's a whole team of people that are considered wayfinders, and
I love that.
And we ask weird questions. We ask what inspires you, what drives you, what are you passionate about, and I don't want to hear about software or pick your algorithm or whatever. Engineering.
Boring.
We used to do a weird thing that we called, what was it? It was the lightning round, and we would ask really weird questions at the beginning.
What sound does a seal make?
Yeah, that was one of them, because I just wanted to disarm people, and exactly. And people that refused to do it, I was like, sorry, no.
Yeah.
Well, I think that within our interviews, and we look for a number of things. One being, don't be an asshole, or they're not an asshole. But everyone at Beta we have aviation, sustainability, and technology. And out of all of the people there,
you got to care about at least one of those things.
You have to care about at least one of those things, or two. 2 is better than 1, and 3 is better than 2. But if you care about aviation and you care about technology and sustainability, what I'm saying is everyone in the company has a common interest. So if you care about 2 out of the 3 of those things, you share a value with another team member there.
I love that. That's great.
I have a very small company so far, and my first hire, my chief of staff, I met her when she was 5. And I've just encouraged her to go to graduate school when she got her master's degree at Harvard. And I just kept my eye on her. And when I started this business, I knew that she was looking for something that was mission-driven. I said, I can't pay you anything for a while. And
is
she's been with me
recruiting.
ever since. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, early recruiting. And the other employees, some of them, like our manufacturing crew, are people that had worked on our, the leaders of the manufacturing crew, of which there are three, one of the facility management and production management and just the whole production lead carpenter. They all worked for another construction company when we built our first multi-pad, which was 3 suite pads together under one roof for faculty housing over in New Hampshire. And they didn't like, oh, that's a good question for me, they didn't like the company culture at this construction company they worked for. And they all quit, not, long before I offered them a job. And so the first person, I said, hey, will you work for us? And he's like, he knew the project, he knew what we were trying to do, and then from him, then he recruited some of the people that worked under him for that other construction company, and it's just gone. We're about, for the first time, so everyone on the team has come through somebody. And with this hire, our this bookkeeper we're getting, it's going to be the first time that we're hiring someone we don't know. And so we've been talking about that. Well, no, that's not true. The laborers, when the laborers come in, the construction team, the production team, they give everyone 2 weeks, and they decide if the person's a good fit. And we had some people working for us. They were diligent. They were fairly good. They 2 of the 3 people came all the time. But when one of the people would talk to one of the other people, it became toxic. And the team says, no, this isn't a good fit. Yeah, they get the mission, they get this and that, but we can't have toxicity when we're working together in tight spaces with tight deadlines. So, rambling answer there for you.
No, I loved it. You got me thinking, though, like, has anyone ever been part of a bad company culture? I mean, I'm sure you all have at some point. Like, what does that feel like? Like, when do you know the company culture isn't right?
When you don't want to go to work, but you have to because of a paycheck. And I don't want anyone to ever feel that way in my company.
Yeah.
It's and as you say, it's not easy
Yeah.
to keep it up, but it's worth it when you do.
Yeah. Premila?
I'd say, I don't know about bad company culture, I think it's a culture, knowing yourself and knowing whether you fit in that company. Because there are places that I thought were questionable, but other employees are thriving there. So I think it's a matter of knowing what works for you and finding the alignment with the organizational culture.
Yeah. Ever been part of a crappy culture? No. It's great. Yeah, great, right? I think a lot of people aren't so lucky, right? And sometimes you do have to get the paycheck, right? We're not all so lucky that you can just work somewhere that you love to work. But I do think, especially with young people, I think it's important to note the things that feel good, right? Whether it's, a manager that sees and believes in you, whether it's feeling validated, whether it's feeling celebrated, like all of those things are important. And I think that it's the job of the leadership to have that kind of mirrored back from your employees, right? So, I don't know, I think it's something that we don't often reflect on until it goes wrong or something feels off. And so I think the more proactive we can be, and obviously that's where the leadership piece comes in, as well as just HR. So when it comes to positive culture, which it feels like we all have going on here, what sort of feeling do you want that to evoke for your employees? Like, it's not just going to work and not dreading it. Like, how do you want them to feel when they're there? Or, if someone asks, do you like your job? Like, what feeling do you want to come to mind?
I want people to feel like they're cared for, and not just our employees, but we recognize that our employees are, no one is an island, right? And we have children, and we have spouses, and we have significant others, and we have dogs, and we have extensions of ourselves. And so we try to support people entirely.
Yeah.
Not a cult. just although speaking of t-shirts, I thought we should have a t-shirt that said, but it was vetoed by HR, that says you can't have culture without
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
But you're the first person to think of that too.
Well, it was, I won't.
It was trademarked already.
Was it trademarked already?
I don't know, maybe.
May have been.
For us too, it's about, I think I mentioned before, psychological health is really important, and we're finding out that more and more. We want people to realize that they're part of something that's bigger than themselves, and the start of every meeting, we talk about our why. Why are we doing what we're doing? And then we have the sales team or the installation team say something about what a customer has said. Like, I don't think a week goes by without us getting a tearful thank you for what you've done. I can't believe you're doing this. And so we make sure that everybody knows, from the guy who's making sure that our manufacturing facility is organized, to the sales guy, to the bookkeeper, that you're part of this team that is keeping families together. And in doing that, we want to keep our team together. And we had this big meeting about, we just built 4 WheelPads for Green Mountain Support Services. Now, this is an organization in Vermont. They have a house up in Wolcott that they provide housing for people that can't get it otherwise. They didn't have any accessible units. So anyway, they bought 4. And we had a session about, we all knew what the problems were in building these 4. But what are we going to do next time? So the whole meeting was focused on that. And at the end of the meeting, I asked everybody, okay, we got another 15 minutes. Everyone, tell something that's in your life experience that most of us probably don't know about, but that contributes to the work we do here. The stories in that, just so that the people feel like they're a whole person. And the things we found out, that one person was in Vietnam. We hadn't known that. Another person was actually in college, but he's very quiet, and he hadn't talked to us and said, I'm going to be leaving in September, but can I come back on the Another man disclosed that he'd been homeless for 2 years. None of us would have ever guessed it. So it was just that feeling of that everyone felt so accepted that one of the people said, oh, we had a kumbaya moment, What do we do with that? But it's not that we need the kumbaya, but we need the feeling that people get from sitting around a campfire in the middle of the night sharing stories.
So I would say, our name is Data Innovation. So we look at the data in terms of seeing whether this is working. And one big indicator for me is employee engagement. And so we do a survey, a Gallup survey, and it has questions like someone at work cares about me. And we look at the scores. And actually, it's pretty good, the score for that question. And then we have other areas to work on. So we have a long ways to go. The gold standard is like to be at the 75th percentile. And we are at the 40th percentile. So we've got work to do.
Yeah. That's great, though. I think data is a big piece of it, right? You can't just go from anecdotal information, right? So, I think we're all in agreement here that company culture is more than just good benefits, right? There's other ways that you care for your employees. So can you all give a couple examples maybe that entrepreneurs in the room can take away of like what weekly or monthly practices do you do as a company to make sure that those ties or bonds outside of, just having good benefits or good pay to help sort of build that company culture? You look like you're ready to go, Premila.
Well, when you're running a global company and it's, we're largely a virtual company, I would say today, because a lot of our workforce works from home, whether in Vermont or elsewhere. And how do you build those connections? So a practice that we have is that actually it began during COVID. So we used to have quarterly meetings with employees where we had like an all-hands meeting, and we moved to monthly during COVID, and we haven't stopped. So we have continued with that monthly practice. And the focus of that meeting is less about business updates. So what we did is before that meeting, we send out a business update. Because we figured, executives talking to the employees, that can be done in an email about what's happening with the business. And then in that meeting, we have a Q&A where people can ask questions, and they can ask questions anonymously. And then a big portion of that meeting is really about collaboration. We might do breakout sessions where people can get to know each other. We may do a certain function might do a day in the life of our function, what it looks like. But it's all around building connections and empathizing with other functions and understanding, as we grow, what's going on with each other personally and then also from a work perspective. So that's very deliberately designed for that.
Yeah. And it seems to be working.
It is, and we obviously get feedback, have surveys, more data about whether it's working and what we can do better. So we're constantly evolving, and it's fully run by employees. Those meetings with an executive sponsor, different executive sponsor for each month.
It's great.
We're lucky in that we right now have, I think I just counted, we have 13 employees. I was shortchanging. But that I told you a little bit about what we do with our meetings, and after each project, it's not about the complaining. We all know what the problems are. It's about what can we do better as a team. And just getting people to communicate with each other. We have we're just getting our annual day for this year. We had to do them differently during COVID, where we spend an afternoon together and just play games and don't talk about business, and everyone always comes. So that's important, and I'm listening to you guys as we grow, because it's not always going to be this easy to keep the culture that we have right now. Not on this level. It's not easy anyway. It doesn't matter how big your company is.
Well, I think, Julie, that's a really good point for startups, right? Is I think a startup could go to one of two ways, and I've seen it go one of two ways, where it's you're so small that you can kind of get away with not intentionally putting a lot of effort into it, or it's small enough that you can put a lot of intention into it, right? So I think, being proactive with that stuff, even if it feels silly when there's only 3 of you in the room, it's still really important to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have stand-up meetings.
Well,
3
yeah, I
days a
think
week.
we have in place a lot of routine business updates or team updates, and that's stand-up meetings 3 days out of 5 days of the week, and that's with 250 people, rooms, and each room has about this many people in it. And you talk about everything that's going on this week. You hear from every single team, the updates, and then you do that with your smaller team as well, with my public affairs team and with Katie's creative team. But I think that we have a lot of other, I wouldn't call them routine, but cultural.
Well, we have
events.
breakfast every
Yeah.
Friday. When Beta was small, everybody that got hired came and had dinner at our house, and they would bring their families, and it feels like moments ago that we were a small business, and then I don't know what happened. It got out of control and
HR.
overwhelming, and now we have a lot of people. But every Friday morning we sit down together, and it's usually, it's definitely me. It's often me and Kyle. Sometimes I drag you along. And we intentionally don't talk about business, but we talk about culture. We talk about what's the best thing about coming to work every day. What's the worst thing about coming to work every day, and and people share how the communication is working, or how they're really struggling to find housing or parking, or and it's sometimes they're small things and sometimes they're really big things, and it really does influence how we move forward and the changes and things that we implement. I think we call them pulse breakfasts, and it's a random sampling of people who might not otherwise sit in a room together. So you've got someone from the fab shop working with someone from the
Structurals team and flight tests, and you're just kind of all over the place with a group of people that may have not met each other and work at the same company, and from different facilities throughout Vermont or others as well.
And if you're a new hire, you have the unlucky fortune of having to sit with me for 2 hours while I try to explain what culture is to Beta, and
And I think that
part those
Along-
thoughts and feelings.
with our stand-up meetings and routine business cultural things, we have, I mean, it's a team of entrepreneurs, so I think that a lot of the events or cultural things are brought on by team members. Like we have cornhole in the hangar every Friday night, and we have these silly disco rodeos where we have a flight training program there. Everybody can learn how to fly an aircraft. We have a fleet of training aircrafts, but our disco rodeo is you sign up for our 30-minute long flights, 45-minute long flights.
And you can bring your family.
And you bring your families, and we have 5Ks every year, and like beta to beta bike rides, and
Katie led that one
I
Yeah.
ran it.
reluctantly.
I did.
she did.
So, well, that's actually a great segue, because one of the things I want to ask, I kept thinking, any Office Space fans in here? A couple? Okay. How many pieces of flair do you have? Right? Like, how do you make sure that culture is not something that's forced, right? Because that's such a fine line. I think virtually it's really hard, but even like breakfast, 5Ks, that kind of stuff, like, what feels obligatory?
5K was forced.
So, exactly, right? Like, for some people, like, is it offering a variety of things? Where like, I'm more of a breakfast gal than a 5K gal, so I'm gonna do that, right? So like, how do you make sure that you're not forcing people into fun, right?
Well, for us, it's optional. You know, if you want to come, if you want to do this, you do it. If you don't, you don't. When we have our meetings where people talk about something that's personal, like the one I explained to you, not everyone's forced to. If they want to pass, they can pass. But what we find is over time they end up wanting to share. They want to be part of the team, but not everybody is outgoing, you know, not everyone. And my daughter works for Airbnb, where they kind of want everyone to be an extrovert, and she's an introvert. And it was very difficult, and she read that book, Quiet. I don't know if any of you have heard about that. And she got up the temerity to talk to Brian Chesky to say, not because they were having a rule that everyone had to be an Airbnb host. And she got up to say,
Sounds like a nightmare, my God.
yeah, and for my daughter, that's not part of her and her family's life. We're Airbnb hosts, but not for her. And once she did that, she got respect. She got respect from the company because a lot of other people stood up. So that, you know, what I find as a business owner, I really take what experiences are from everybody. You know, I'll learn from so much from tonight, and just implement that. So I think forcing someone, you can encourage, entice, invite, but no flair. Geez Louise.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think I'm curious to see how that changes, right? When there's the one person that's always opting out, right? And I think that's where you might want to say, hey, what are you interested in? How can you opt in, and see if there's still sort of a culture fit. So I have a couple specific questions for each company. One of the ones I wanted to ask for Katie and Willa is just, Beta has a very high profile in the state, nationally, internationally. How does that impact your culture? And like, do people come in with preconceived notions of what Beta is like? And do you have to kind of be aware of that when hiring? Like, that to me feels like a kind of a hard piece of it, right? Is you're not a scrappy little startup anymore, right? You're a big company that has a huge reputation. And so how does that impact your company culture?
It feels like a scrappy little company still. Does it not?
It does.
A little bit. I think some of the things that we have to break down at the beginning are these ideas that we are a flat organization. We get a lot of new hires that think that you're not accountable to anybody here, but that's not true. What we mean when we say we're a flat organization is that there's no job that a team member at Beta should be unwilling to do. So if I'm not going to ask you to go and wash an airplane if I'm not willing to go and do it myself. And so I do. We all do. I don't really know. I feel like
I don't think it has, and I think it's because of our culture, and it's like everyone, we're all people. And I mean, we had the honor of having Jill Biden here, and I guess that was last April. And I don't, like, that place got pretty heavy security, but like, I don't feel like anyone's mannerisms or how they talked to each other or treated each other on that day changed whatsoever.
if anything, I think it's impacted us positively because we've been able to attract a lot of really cool, really amazing people with incredible stories and incredible backgrounds. And I don't know,
I think it's grown our culture being able to interact with those people, and the right ones too, right?
Yeah.
No assholes.
Yeah, it's a good rule. Any like growing pains? Because I mean, 600 people is a lot of people. So like, how were you able to maintain that through that many hires? Is it scaling the right department at the right time? Is it just asking the right questions at the right time? Is it setting really clear expectations? Like, what would you kind of point to? I'm just thinking of other companies that are scaling quickly.
well, we haven't done it perfectly, and we've made mistakes, and we've had to unwind those mistakes. But I think when you have a really good core group of people, hiring, like, I don't know, people with similar values and similar interests and aspirations, then, more people begets more amazing people, attracts more amazing people. And it's the mistakes that we've made is when some of those outliers that have found their way in sort of pull in other people, then those folks tend to be sort of cultural outliers as well. But so we hold on pretty tightly to, we hire slow, I guess, is how I would put that. We just really want to make sure that, because we're not for everybody. And I'm certainly not for everybody. And it's, so folks,
Give them an opportunity to opt out.
yeah, are you sure you want this? And,
Yeah.
I think we've been really, really fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, we had this conversation at 13 people, and we had this conversation at 30 people, and every single time it's like, oh my God, we're growing. How are we going to maintain culture?
Yeah.
And we have grown from the first conversation of 9 people of, oh my God,
What happens when we're 40?
What happened? And I mean, I think that as long as everyone has follows the same values that the beta has, and are all passionate about the mission, then.
Well, and we're able to do things now that we couldn't do when we were, 40 people. We opened a health clinic, which has been phenomenal. Thank you, Beta Health, for keeping me on the straight and narrow this week and telling me to wear my sunglasses inside and drink lots of water and all that. But it's that has been a really amazing benefit. We're working really hard to try to open a child care center for people. We're doing things that we have a food program and we support local farms, and we feed everybody a healthy, mostly local, mostly organic lunch every day for no cost. And we couldn't do that when we were 9 people. It just, we hadn't reached a, what's the word I'm looking for? Come on, brain. We hadn't, critical mass. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. We hadn't reached a critical mass where it made sense to do that yet.
Yeah.
And so as we grow, our culture's, it's similar, it's different, but I think it's better.
Yeah, we've been able to make a bigger impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also the bigger we get, I think sort of the louder and weirder we have to get in order to to reach all the corners of the room, and I feel like I embody
Same.
that, right?
Yeah. All right, Julie, something to look forward to, right?
Well, that's exactly, we talk now about what we're going to do when we sell 45 in a year. We're on target to sell 45 next year. So we're talking about, okay, what's going to change? What can we do? And we have all these ideas that we'd love to implement today. But we decided to grow at a pace that we could do it on our own. We decided not to go for venture capital because the few people that we approached, they were like, "Oh yeah, I'll give you $250,000, and I'm just a little, just 40% of your company." And I'm like, no. And so we've just basically self-funded, and right now it's paying off, but it's a lot more slower growth than we would have liked. And we keep egging each other on, okay, we got to do this because we got to keep more families together. Because so many families, you've got someone that is in a hospital bed in the middle of a living room, or it's just the situation for the lack of accessible housing in our country makes it so, for example, a veteran who does not need to be in a nursing home, but cannot go home because his home isn't accessible, and that family's separated, rather than the guy being home in his little sweet pad or whatever, who would then be able to work and be an active member of the society and his family. So this is a roundabout the way, but we keep thinking about how can we do this, how can we affect more families, and how can we make sure that our team continues to grow and our culture continues to grow. So this is really good for me to hear all this.
Love it. And then, Premila, I wanted to ask you, you're the only one here that's not a founder, right? That wasn't there at the beginning of the company. It was founded the same year I was. So it's basically a startup.
You look great.
Thank you so much.
You're so
Yeah, it's
welcome.
Water. So, coming in later, not being the founder, did you sort of, did you take on any sort of cultural problems that were already there before you that you had to solve? Or how did you kind of step into a culture that was already established?
So I would say, first of all, I inherited a good foundation. And what I mean by that is there's something that's very in the DNA of DI, which I'm very proud of, is the fact that we believe if we treat our customers right and we treat employees right, the investors get taken care of. Mm-hmm. And we've been owned by founders, private equity, and now public company. And we have stuck to that. So I would say that's one thing, like foundationally was good. But as far as where the organization was when I took over, that was like back in 2016, the thing about our organization is we're a medical device, so we're dealing with patient health. And so as a result, we take, the quality is very, very important to us at DI. And, but that also is a two-sided thing because it makes us a little risk averse. So on a spectrum of you prefer stability or you are flexible, when I took over, we were, more on the safety, and that meant stability. But innovation is in our company name, we're a technology company. So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect is as we had grown, you could rely on hallway conversations, and we no longer could rely on hallway conversations for information to move. And so it was very clear that we were very siloed by function because, what engineering did customer support, implementation, training, they did all of that, product management at one point. Now we have different functions for every one of them. And we were not necessarily communicating across as well as we should. So that's what I inherited and realized that for us to keep growing and scaling, we would need to evolve. So change management was a big part of, I would say my job was a lot of change management.
And how did you approach that? Was it, start by kind of learning, speaking with your kind of leadership team to see what sort of issues they were facing, or how did you kind of approach that beast?
So once it became evident that in order to grow, we couldn't do the same things that got us here to get where we aspired to. It was very clear. And so, but the question is, how do you change management about how do you bring others along, right? And so there are many dimensions. It's not a magic silver bullet to do cultural change. And it requires how you hire. I think that you're hiring for the company you want to have, having very clear values, making sure your leadership team is super clear on the strategy, the values, and that they're modeling that. And then finally for us, in terms of the silo piece of it, the thing that really helped us was every year we select a cross-functional project, something big that we have a lot of input into to say, this is the one thing we're going to do next year. And it's, it affects a lot of different functions. And so we bring teams together to work on that the whole year. And it gets a lot of visibility. And that has helped break down the silos as well.
That's awesome.
So we, as long as we're all working for something in common.
Yeah. And can you also talk a little bit about, not only are you, is your company mostly remote, it's many countries involved as well. Can you talk about how that has played a role in the culture of the company?
Sure. So I think like any group of people, whether it's a whole country or the world, I think you're better off finding what you have in common, and chances are very high that you have more in common than you are different, even though everyone wants to focus on the difference. And so we focus on what we have in common, which is the fact that we are very much very customer focused and very patient oriented. And so that's what binds us, because a human in Brazil is the same human in the US. And we're solving for the same human problems at the end of the day in terms of patient health. So I would say, going back to that why, start with why, is critical. But there are little things, making sure that your leaders have global experience goes a long way, because you've got to be able to empathize with what it's like. Making sure that have, inclusion and belonging when you're living in a foreign country and headquarters in the U.S., it's really important to work extra hard. So, meetings can happen Monday to Thursday between 8 to 11, those kind of norms. Every meeting I start with, something like good morning, bon dia, bonjour, because you have to constantly remind your employees that we're a global company. All our conference rooms in Colchester are named after where we have offices. So Brussels, Sao Paulo, Hong Kong. So constant reminders that we're global and not be so US-centric.
Yeah, visual aids are important with that as well, and just having it front of mind always. I love that. Did you have something to add, Willa? Oh.
She liked her conference room idea.
Oh, nice.
I do.
Yeah, that's good.
Ohio.
That's always the last one to be booked. No one books the Ohio one.
I like saying, let's meet in Hong Kong.
Oh, that's fun.
Ohio doesn't have the same ring, does it? No offense if you're from Ohio.
Ohio's great. Beautiful this time of year.
Love Ohio.
So about a month ago, I asked each of you, what is your number one goal or priority for company culture this year? And I got three, and I think I told you like one sentence or less, or like in 3 words. I asked for a very short answer. So don't worry, I'm going to remind you what you said. Good. But I'd love each of you to take a minute to sort of elaborate on your answer. So I'll start with you, Katie. Your goal was for every team member to feel empowered to stand up for our values, which I love. Can you talk a little bit about how you're achieving that through your leadership?
Yeah, well, you caught me at like a fiery moment.
Yes.
When you asked that question, we had an incident, and when we have
All right, now we're getting there.
when we have incidents, whether it's some idiot leaves a cinder block tied to the tail of an airplane and goes to take off with it, which would be
Did not take off.
they did not take off, but he was taxiing. We ask that people come. No one was injured in this scenario. Hypothetical. No, it was a very
Incident,
weird
not an accident.
incident,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
an accident. We ask that people talk about their mistakes and share their mistakes, because it could save a life. It could save time or money, or, other people from making
Other
the same
people are now
mistake.
quadruple checking that they didn't do the
They
same
are
thing.
100%, and it's not because we want to shame that person. It's because we do want to learn, and what we're doing is pretty high stakes. And so, we ask people to share those mistakes. And you sent me this email right after I felt like a pretty critical mistake was made. We had a room full of students and a outside human who was a guest in our facility, and we were teaching a course to this human's students, and I'm trying to be very careful. And there were observers from Beta in the room as well. We have a very transparent, open door policy where, aside from like the executive session and our board meetings, if you want to go to a meeting that you weren't invited to, you're certainly welcome to do that. If you work on the battery team and you want to learn about motors, then you should go to a motor stand-up, because you can learn and grow, and we'll all be better for it. And it doesn't matter if you're an intern or if you're, we encourage this within Beta. You're welcome anywhere as long as you can behave moderately appropriately, right? Which they feel like is a reasonable standard. And so this guest in our facility asked the Beta team members who were there to learn and grow, and also they had put together this, the coursework and helped to put together this session. She said, all these people need to leave. They haven't paid for this, and therefore they're somehow, mooching off the system. And I was mortified that the people, maybe that was a strong word to use. Sorry, Beta team members, but they didn't stand up for our values, which is, everyone in that room was a contributor. Everyone in that room was a collaborator. And that's just not how we treat people. And so in a place where everybody's supposed to feel safe and included, they were kicked out, which to me was gross.
And you were like, what can I do to make sure that they feel empowered to say something in that moment?
Because they knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
And they both came to me in tears and said, I'm so sorry this happened. I want to make sure that never happens again. They knew what the right thing to do was.
Yeah.
They just, they didn't feel empowered to stand up and say, you know what, this isn't how we do things here.
Yeah.
And they won't make that mistake again. But, and I think just like the guy with the cinder block on the back of his airplane,
It's really a metaphor for the other scenario.
it really is. Like, we talked about that publicly, and we said, this was a mistake, and this is how we can improve, because these are our values, and it's really important that everybody feels empowered to stand up for them when they see them being skirted or ignored, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Thanks.
Yeah. This is you like,
I was thought we were gonna.
yeah.
You were
Like, this is her with a concussion. I'm like, oh my God. Okay, Julie, you said share efficiencies kindly. Tell me about that.
Well, that was right after the meeting I was telling you about, when we looking for how are we going to do it better next time. And when we finished this meeting, all these people that are used to a very different type of culture in the construction industry just were so happy, because no one stepped on each other's toes. And we have people that have 35 years of experience and some who are just starting out. And everyone respected each other's contributions to this. And when you wrote that, I was like, oh, we just did this. I need to keep this. This is something that's really vital that doesn't usually happen in the construction industry. So more, I would just want to keep reinforcing that in all levels of the company.
And how's it going?
Well, this year, and as you know, we're very slow growing. And this year, we surpassed $1 million in our little, and it's switched this culture of kindness. So it's really exciting
I love that.
in the construction industry, and no pinups, you know, no sexual harassment, not even a hint.
Love it. That's what we're going for. Not even a hint. All right. Premila, you said building community and connections. How's that going?
Good. I mean, that's always a work in progress.
You're here, so I kind of had you, locked in with that goal.
Well, I would say the way it came about is through our employees, this building community and connections. So every year, I told you about this monthly employee meeting we have, and it's run by employees. And we also have like a big annual meeting kickoff in January, and that's run by this group of employees. And then they run it, that theme throughout the year. So this year and last year, and it's a changing group of employees, came up with this concept of building communities and connections. This is not Premila's theme. And I think, I call it sometimes an upside down culture at DI because our employees are so engaged in these topics, and they have their finger on the pulse. And so they're empowered to come up with these things. I obviously hear about these themes from them, and they, and why, and then we go with it for the whole year. So it's 2 years in a row this has been a topic, and it makes sense, like coming out of COVID, that was really important.
Totally. Well, it's as important internally as it is, with your customers and people in your community outside of the company as well.
Absolutely.
That's a tough one to argue with, too. They come to you and they're like, we want to build community. And you're like, I don't know. All right. I'm going to give you lovely people a chance to ask some questions, and going to give Dave a job, Don't mess it up, Dave. Who would like to ask these smart people a question? Peter Cole has a question.
So, we've talked about some people are introverted, some are extroverted, but even with extroverts, you don't always know what they're really thinking and sharing. So I heard you say that sometimes you do a survey, Gallup, 12 questions that matter, is it?
Yeah, 12 questions, yeah.
So I'm curious, how often do you sample anonymously from your employees to know what they're saying, what they're thinking, what they're feeling?
We do it annually, and then we do a pulse survey, with just a couple questions, maybe that we're working on mid-year, and then.
And was that the 40% that you want to get to 75%?
That's right. That's right. So we are benchmarking against essentially all the companies that do that survey out there for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I was going to ask, so being based in Vermont, I mean, how relevant do you feel that Vermont as is relevant to your culture in terms of your work culture? And then also just thinking forward about what, how your team represents your business in those communities. So being ambassadors of your businesses.
You asking all of us?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go first. Hang on, I got to review it a second. For us, when I started my first business in 1988, green was a color. And we told people, it was the architecture business, about how we were going to be sustainable, and we weren't going to make interns work for 60 hours for a stipend. And we had all these grandiose ideas, and everyone said, oh, you'll be out of business in five years. That was 35 years ago. We were the first B Corp, certified B Corp architectural firm in the state of Vermont. And part of that is because I found Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, which is the most active BSR in the country. And with that, of course, I joined them because I had somebody that believed in our craziness. And then became board chair of that. And then Jeffrey Hollander said, oh, Green America needs help. Green America it does the same thing what Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility does for the whole country. And now I'm board chair of that. And it just, I think to me, that whole thing, what VBSR as a community did to help us say, yes, you can do well and do good at the same time. Because it's important to stay in business. Otherwise, you can't do any of the things that you want to do.
Anyone else want to answer that one?
I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I don't really know much beyond the state of Vermont. We chose to grow our business here despite a lot of obstacles. We were offered millions of dollars, frankly, hundreds of millions of dollars to move to the panhandle of Florida or to Bentonville, Arkansas. And yet, we almost didn't build our manufacturing facility because it was hard to put in a parking lot. So there's
an understatement, huh?
There were, despite the challenges of growing a business here and the incentives that were coming in from other states, Vermont is really special to us, to my husband and to me and to my kids now who, we chose to move back here and raise our family here out of college. And we, I think that Vermonters have a tenacity and a, I don't know, we survive these winters that are dark and cold and miserable, and I think we just...
It's only November, guys.
I know. I think that we just have this spirit of not taking no for an answer and seeing problems as challenges, and, we're the most educated state in the country, and we just are surrounded by good, brilliant, hardworking people that understand what a community is and what it's meant to be and what it feels like. And I really can't imagine doing this anywhere else, which, people think it's weird that we have an aerospace company here and not in, I don't know,
Anywhere else.
Ohio. No, I'm just kidding.
Again, beautiful this time of year.
Beautiful this time of year. But did I even come close to answering that question?
Your employees, so I know how they love spreading the love about Beta. So I'm always curious about how much of the values that come from you, kind of them representing your company out into the surrounding community.
Well, I think that's incredibly important to us, and that's another we don't want assholes in the building or in your community or mine, meaning where we live. But I think that we just try, when new team members come in and old ones that have been there, we try to arm them with the best information, education, and tools and resources possible. So not only can they grow as a person, but they can go back to their community and grow their community members as well.
You want to add?
Yeah, certainly we're founded in Vermont. We're very much present here. But I would say for us, what happened is, I think many of you probably saw the New York Times article about, I think it was called Gray Vermont, sort of, yeah. And so we hit that in 2018 with from an engineering perspective in finding employees. And we were looking tied to our next gen solutions. So, we're using state-of-the-art technology, and we needed employees, and we couldn't ramp up. For 6 months, jobs were open. And so that caused us to really look out of state because we thought if we don't find a solution to this, we're going to slow down, and that's going to affect everybody. And so that's I think as a state, that's something very real that we need to wrestle with.
I don't know. I feel like that was a challenge. And when we were in high school, I remember my husband and I specifically being told, you won't be able to get a job in a STEM field in the state of Vermont. It's just, it doesn't exist. And you'll have to move elsewhere. You'll have to raise your family someplace else. And I don't really like being told no. And so I think we just dug in and we're like, the hell we can't. And we have been extremely lucky. We've had lots of people who have roots here, who have moved back. You know, who have family here, who went to school here. A lot of people who work at Beta have touched Vermont before, you know, if not being born and raised here, you know, have a connection here somehow and have come to work here. That said, you know, housing is a challenge, childcare is a challenge. All those things are a challenge to living and working here. But we try to help folks with that too. We had, how many people have lived with us over the years?
A lot.
40, I think I counted this summer. I think it was 46.
You've had over 40 employees live with you because they couldn't have housing?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's leadership, people.
We've got a guy who comes and lives with us every other week for the last 6 years.
Wow.
But now he's like a family member, so
He's a good cook.
yeah.
There you go. That makes a difference.
Kelly Keene.
Kelly Keene. Hi, honey.
How do you influence culture if you yourself might feel like an outsider? So like maybe you work at a company with a lot of men or a lot of other technical people. Yeah.
Oh, I can answer this, I think.
Baller question, Kelly Keene.
I was a stay-at-home mom for 17 years. This is my first job since before Willa was born, and before that I worked at the American Red Cross.
Which apparently had a good culture, though, because you said you weren't part of a bad culture.
I mean, it was fine,
Yeah,
I guess, or I
good.
was unaware of it or something. But, and all of a sudden I found myself surrounded by the smartest people in the entire world. And, I mean, I have a liberal arts degree but Champlain College, and go Champlain. But I mean, it was daunting, and I found myself like, you want me to be in charge of company culture around all these brilliant old white men, and we're a little better than that, but it's. I don't even remember where I was going with this. I'm going to blame the head injury. But what was the question?
Well, like, what has made you, so in that question is, like, when you feel out of place, when you feel inadequate, like, how do you change culture when you're...
Oh, you just have to let your freak flag fly and know that, like, that doing things differently is what has attracted people to us, I think. And it's... I don't know, it took me a while to grow into the confidence to, I don't know, speak to a room full of people about something I know very little about, but that I'm living every single day. And it's, I don't know, it's
What has helped you feel more comfortable doing that?
I think it's like it's cyclical, right? Like people appreciate it and respond to it, and so then you feel like you can
Some feedback.
it's a feedback loop,
Yeah.
right? Like you can give a little more and expose a little more, and it I don't know, I don't have experience anywhere else in the world to draw from. I don't have bad cultural experiences. I don't even have real work experience. It's just I don't do a good job putting things into silos. So it's, you know, what you see is what you get, whether you are the First Lady of the United States or whether you're...
I don't know. I think raising kids for 17 years is probably way harder than a lot of the jobs that they had.
Maybe. I don't know. They were pretty good kids.
I can't answer your question from my own experience, but I will from my daughter's experience that I had talked about working for Airbnb. And she continues to do that sort of thing. And her way of doing it is getting what she's uncomfortable about. It took her 6 months to get the gumption to say, we can't be an Airbnb host. And then she read this book, Quiet, and then she got more and more data points, more information. And then she went to first her manager and said, I'm really having trouble with this. And the manager shot her down. So she went to other employees who she thought also might be having trouble with being an Airbnb host. Anyway, and she's done that with other situations where she just gathered information and practiced going to the most senior person that she could go to that she felt would listen to her, and impassionately, like I would just storm in, but she did it, and that's her way. And she was able to make not huge culture change, but enough culture change so that she felt comfortable.
And probably helped other people feel comfortable as well,
Yes.
right? And I think that's a big
Yes.
piece of it is if you're feeling something, there's likely someone else that's feeling that too.
Right.
And I think it's really cool that, especially as an introvert, like you said, she was able to do that in her own way.
In her home.
Premila, did you have something to add there?
Sure. So I always call it like a triple jeopardy in the world of CEOs. You know, I'm a woman of color, and I'm not very tall. And so it's hard to be seen. And what I would say is, I've relied on performance, like deliver. And if that doesn't work for you, my advice always, especially to young people, is make sure that you figure out what do you want to save and then spend the rest. Most people figure out what they spend and save what's left over. Do it in reverse, because then you can have choices and you won't be trapped. And if it's not working for you and you're treated, you feel like you're treated, and your performance is not being recognized, you have options. There's a whole world out there waiting for you.
Wow. All right, last question.
Hi, Lisa Gorky. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I have a bunch of women founders sitting with me, and I think for all of us, one of the things that we talk about a lot is that feminine energy, not necessarily men or women, and all of you tend to be in industries that are very male-dominated. So wondering what you're doing to really change that conversation, because we don't just want to fit in a man's world or a masculine world, particularly in a toxic masculine world. So what are you doing to bring more females into STEM and into your organizations and really change the conversation where we can be performing but also be women, not try to fit into a man's hierarchy?
Willa, I feel like you can answer that well.
Yeah, I think that I see that a lot in the workforce development that I work in, and we have, this quarter, we engage between the state of Vermont and New York, which we also have a facility in, but primarily in Vermont, 3,700 kids. And that's through, we have a mobile simulator that we bring around to schools and to workforce development events, job fairs and career fairs. And those are, I often lead them, and it's often me speaking to a group of young men. And it's disappointing all the time to see that. So, and that's in all STEM, but very heavy within aviation too, and that's where my focus is. So there's Women in Aviation International, which is a nonprofit organization.
President of the Vermont branch.
And
Just saying.
3 years ago, come this March, it was realized that we didn't have a Women in Aviation Vermont chapter. So myself and two other women founded a Women in Aviation Vermont chapter. And from there, we've hopefully been able to inspire and empower a couple young females to get involved in aviation and create those pathways and inspirations. And I also do that with our Young Eagles, which is an organization that introduces kids between the age of 7 and 18, and you can go for a discovery flight for free. So they're volunteer pilots who volunteer their time and their aircraft and their fuel, and they go up and take a student for a discovery flight. And from there, if you become an EAA member, that's the acronym for it, and then you can take ground school for free and learn the ground knowledge you need to become a pilot. And you're introduced to this tight-knit community that wants to support you and help you grow. So that's not primarily focused on females. However, last fall we had an event, and it was a Girls in Aviation Day event, and we went and we flew 104 girls, and out of the 94 of them had never been in an aircraft before.
But it's not it's very intentional that we send Willa out into the world to represent Beta to schools and to kids, because I think that you need to see someone who looks like you in order to see yourself when you're a young person in that role later in life. And so Willa's a pilot. She got her pilot's license when she was 17. And so for her, we have a group, we call them study hall, and they're dedicated to creating experiences and devices and what do we call them?
They're live demonstrations of systems within an aircraft.
That make it understandable for somebody like me or the fifth
The point
grader.
is that you can bring a third grader up there or kindergarten up there and explain how a motor works, and you can also bring one of our investors who's also an engineer, and they can look at it and be like, oh, that's how your electric motor works. But to what you're saying is it's another part of culture. It's like a young female is going to feel more comfortable, usually, to come and talk. If I'm standing next to a tall guy who's also a pilot and she's like, oh, I want to fly an airplane, she's probably not going to go talk to the guy. But they see that someone that looks like you is able to do it, then they might feel empowered to do it themselves.
I love that.
Yeah. For our architectural practice, which was more STEM than right now we're in construction, although there's a brand new organization I just heard about today about women in construction. It just started last week. So I'm going to join them because when we started our business, the closest women in construction affiliate was in New York City. So I would go down there. But in it's easy to get interns. So that's what we would do when we would get some female interest, but we'd go to schools and say, and really recruit basically as internships and have people for summer internships. And we tend to have a high school student, a undergrad student, and a graduate student, and with a mix of gender and cultural color, to just say, anyone can be part of this.
So within DI, we have an affinity group called DI Women's Network, and it's because, sometimes you might be one of two engineers on a quality assurance team, and it's nice for our female employees to have other professionals outside of their function get to know, and because we are sharing similar struggles with managing kids and all the professional demands. So that's a DI-specific women's network to support our female employees and help grow them. And then I would say, personally for me, one of the things I have done is look within the community because I think someone made this point, you have to go back to, is the pipeline there, right?
Right.
And so for example, I'm on Champlain College's board, and we have a Women in Cybersecurity program, and that's a big initiative there. So it's grassroots, for sure.
There's one other part of your question I want to answer, which is, I think for a long time when women were becoming leaders of businesses and going out and talking, they would wear, almost the female version of a male suit. When I go to play, I dress like this, I am a woman. I like to have fun. I'm very serious, and I'm running two really good businesses. But I think, to answer your question, my first was because I go out there and be myself. And it's unusual, especially in the architectural world. I tell you, you look at the majority, not all, but the majority of female architects, it's a very male-oriented profession, and construction's even worse. So I think part of it is we all have to just go out there and be ourselves. And if we lean towards male inclination, that's fine too. But if we don't, because the majority of us don't, we have different ways of being female, we should go out there and be us, not try to be like the other leaders in the field.
Yeah, and I think it's up to everyone, male leaders as well, to, leave space, right? I mean, I was giving Dave a hard time at the beginning, so I guess I'll be nice to him at the end. But, I'm speaking from a 75% female energy team, and from day one, when it was just Dave and I, he said, here's my calendar, come to any meeting you want to come to. And he, even though I was like a part-time operations coordinator, he introduced me as his partner at VSET. And when people would, try to speak to him about the fund, he'd say, well, Sam can talk to you about that, right? And so that's a way that a male ally can step in and make space. That's the only nice thing I have to say about Dave tonight. I'm going to just stop there. Usually he drives me nuts, but I love the guy. All right, we do have to wrap up. We're over time. I didn't write that part down. But I just want to thank the four of you so much for being here tonight and being vulnerable and
Thank you all for coming and giving us an opportunity to talk about what we do and why we do it.
yeah. All right, well, stick around, have a drink, hang out. Thanks again for coming, and we hope to see you again in January.